resilience, focus, discipline, courage. Some of the key ingredients in manifesting your vision into a reality. My name is Kim Niles. Join me as we delve into what it takes to make your mark.
Hello and welcome to the Make Your Mark talk show. Today we have a very, very special guest in the studio. Her name is Vivian Kay. Welcome, Vivian.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
So Vivian is the CEO of Kinky Curly Yaki, which clearly she displays magnificently. So Vivian, one of the things I was really taken back by reading your bio was the fact that you were able to take something that you discovered, you literally stumbled upon, and turn it into $1 million revenue business. And then noticing that a few months later, that aha moment, we're like, oh, really? I did that? So I know you're gonna do a much better job of telling your story. Tell us how you got here.
Well, I started, so this is way back in, what year was it? I wanna say in 2005. My sister was getting married and she needed a decorator. So my first business, this is Kinky Curly Yaki, is actually my second business.
Okay.
So I started as a wedding decorator, and my sisters needed, they hired a decorator, and the decorator said, oh, you know what, we need to do decor, and it's going to cost $1,000. And then we hired her, and then a few weeks before her wedding, she came back and said, oh, I'm going to need another $1,000. So that was when my first light bulb went off, because I thought, wow, I need to start a company where I can provide simple decor and the prices are laid out, so you know exactly what you're getting into. So that was my first business. And while I was running that business, I needed to look, quote unquote, presentable. And we all know what that means. So I wanted hair that looked authentic on me, and no one would have asked me where I bought it from. And plus I was tired of the whole African in the front and Indian in the back. So when I searched for hair textures that resembled my own, which is a 4C texture, I found that it was buried underneath all the Malaysian, Brazilian, all that sexy, exotical texture. And I thought, wow, no one's just selling kinky hair. And I just sort of filed the idea in the back of my head. Because at the time I was running a successful business and I just wanted to focus on that. And it wasn't until I went to a Black girl meetup and a woman came up to me and asked me what my regimen was and who my hairdresser was. And I was like, girl, it's a weave. And she was like, oh, I would totally buy that. And that's when the light bulb went off again. Because, I'd had the idea and I felt it in the back of my head, but here it was, actual proof that someone else would buy it as well. So in the down season of my wedding business, back in December of 2012, I launched Kinky Curly Yaki. And in the first year, it immediately took off. Because at the time, there was no one just selling kinky hair. And then, now we're almost 7 years later, and it's been making over $1 million in revenue a year, US dollars.
Okay. No, girl, that's serious.
US dollars.
Good for you. So now you said, one of the things you said is that when you're in the event planning field, basically in terms of decor, and you needed to look the part. So let's go down that road a little bit more in terms of what that definition meant to you. I know what it means for me, but what did it mean for you?
Well, as Black women, we've sort of had it drilled into our heads from when we're young that the standard of beauty is the long, straight hair. You see your friends at school and their hair was flying in the wind and our hair didn't fly in the wind. So, as we started to go into the workplace, we would chemically straighten our hair to look like our white counterparts.
Yes.
And I think, with the rise of YouTube and social media, we started to learn that we don't want to look like that. We want to look like how the hair grows out of our heads.
Yep.
And I was part of that movement because I wanted to look authentic. Because I know, 32 inches of Malaysian does not look natural on me. Yep. It may look cute, but it didn't feel authentic. Yes. And what I was really after was just trying to be my most authentic self. And not having to hide behind weaves that didn't look like it grew out of my head. So in doing that, what I like to say is Kinky Curly Yaki, you're not necessarily buying hair, you're buying the confidence to show up in the world as we are. People say, weaves aren't as you are because it's not growing out of your head, blah, blah, blah. You have to remember, our hair is not suited to the North American environment. And especially when you're living a busy lifestyle, even as a mother, as an entrepreneur, as a 9-to-5, whatever it is, sometimes we don't have the time to sit and cry over a failed twist out.
Yes.
Or, your edges aren't laying right, or whatever the case may be. So I wanted to provide an option for Black women to still look like themselves and not have Karen or Chad ask them about their hairstyle this week. Hey, Keisha, what's going on? I see your hair looks different this week. And it's like, no, Chad, no, Karen. Focus on my work and not on my hair.
Yes.
So that's basically it.
Okay. And now, for me, I could totally identify with that. I've never been able to wear straight hair. Mm-hmm. Now, I think for me, what it was that it wasn't my personality.
Yep.
And I didn't feel, I couldn't see myself buying bone straight hair, Chinese hair.
Yeah.
And, hair for me clearly is an expression of self.
Right.
And how I'm feeling in the moment. And I did feel that way in walking into a boardroom and feeling different and feeling like I had to fit in. So you creating this movement, Kinky Curly Yaki, and letting women know that it is okay to be your authentic self and you have options. And one of the things for me, I've always seen hair as an accessory.
Absolutely.
Now, there's such a detrimental thin line there though, right?
Yes, yeah.
Where it's like, sometimes it's an accessory, but then we sometimes make it a necessity. So that is something for me which also has been a huge journey, because once you start to identify yourself with a look, stepping outside of the look, sometimes you just don't feel beautiful anymore because you have this look of yourself and you're used to people looking at you just as much as you say, you know what, Karen, Josh, don't touch my hair, don't talk about my hair, focus on my work. Sometimes we actually thrive in the environment when they're like, wow, look at your hair.
Yeah.
So how has that showed up in your business? Have you ever found that, women or even yourself somehow got stuck on, this is the look I want to portray, but I'm afraid of taking off the mask at times?
Well, I'm luckily for me, I get high on my own supply. So I always tell people,
That's a good way to put it.
The next time you see me, I probably won't look a certain way. Like, this is my, Viv boss look. But then my everyday look is literally a 4C ponytail.
Okay.
So I sort of, I get that because I walk that fine line. But, that's a tough question because I carry 6 different textures. So I go everything from bone straight relaxed all the way to 4C kinks, right? I even have one texture, it's called my straight natural, and I call it my LinkedIn hair.
Oh. Because
there's sometimes when you just as much as we would love to be ourselves, sometimes you just have to fit in. But you want to fit in your own way.
Yes.
So this texture in particular is textured, but it's still straight. Like, it's straight, but it has some texture to it. So it sort of still fits into that presentable mode, but it has some texture to it so you can, fight the power quietly.
Absolutely. And I love that you said that because there are, and sometimes for me, explaining this to younger people is a little bit harder, but sometimes you do just have to fit in.
Yeah.
Like, there's no way around it. Rome wasn't built in a day.
Right.
We can't have our silent protest,
right.
But when you need to get ahead, you need to get ahead.
Right. Like, Rome wasn't built in a day. It was built brick by brick. But it's not, you can't build it by just showing up and sometimes, in some situations, you have to sort of play the game.
Yes, you do.
So by playing the game, you have to show them what your standard of beauty looks like. So if you show up one day in long, silky, blonde, hair down to your waist, don't get me wrong. If that's your thing, that's your thing.
Yep.
But then there's this sort of expectation that sort of follows that. But if you show up in a textured hair, then they come to expect that.
Yes.
Right? So then now you're showing them what your beauty looks like.
Yep.
And it trains them. But if we keep showing up in these exotical textures, guess what? They're going to keep expecting that. So if we show up in our dreadlocks, if we show up in our braids, if we show up in our big curly nappy hair, guess what? They're going to come to expect that more. So we have to show them.
Absolutely. Well, on that note, we are going to take a quick break and we will be right back. From a tender age, I recognized that I was not the average girl. I was always opinionated, outspoken, and for the most part, unapologetic. I was born to lead, to inflict positive change, to serve. I was born a leader. Harnessing this internal drive led me to spearheading several businesses while unlocking potential within large organizations in director roles throughout the city. While on this quest, I discovered my love for people and passion for personal development. Throughout my career, I have mentored hundreds of individuals, both personally and professionally, channeling my belief of self-care and with an avid love for fitness. Daily, I nurture my mind, body, and soul, embracing the very act of self-love. I truly do believe that you cannot give what you don't have. With a commitment to living on purpose and within my purpose, my personal mantra is to leave you better than I met you. Hello, and we are back on the Make Your Mark talk show, and today we have Vivian Kay, the beautiful Vivian Kay, in the house, and we're having some great discussion. So just before the break, we were talking about the fact that sometimes you do need to look the part walking into certain spaces for certain doors to open up for you, which one of the things I love about Kinky Curly Yaki is that you create, you have the option for people to choose that. So they can still authentically be themselves, but as you said, the LinkedIn profile, they've got that look. So in building Kinky Curly Yaki, Vivian, what would be one of your biggest accomplishments that you would say to date?
I don't really see things as big accomplishments, just because I tend to see things I do things in small steps, right?
Okay.
I don't necessarily have this big goal in mind. It's just, I know that if I create a set of habits, that I will get to this place, or I will get to this goal. And then by the time I get to the goal, to me, it's not such a big accomplishment, because I'm like, well, of course I got there, because I did all the things I was supposed to do. I took all those small steps. I laid the framework brick by brick to get there. So I don't really see it as a big accomplishment, but I think just the fact that I've managed to create this $1 million business, despite all the obstacles that I encountered. I'm all the things that you're not supposed to be when you're a $1 million business. Like, I'm a single mother, I'm a college dropout, I'm an immigrant, all these obstacles that I had in front of me. Yet I still managed to create this $1 million business. So I guess if I had to choose an accomplishment, it would be just overcoming all those obstacles to become that.
Okay. And I mean, I think I hear you on that, because for me, it's about the small wins. And I celebrate the small wins, because I think that's sometimes how I find that depression and anxiety sets in.
Absolutely.
Is because you got this big goal that you want to accomplish, and guess what? That's not scheduled till like 2022. Well, I don't know if I'm going to make it to 2022. So I want to celebrate today.
Yeah.
And, if I took today it's like our 5th taping in our episode. It's like, you know what? I want to celebrate that.
Yeah.
Because it could have stopped at 1, but now we're at 5.
Right.
So whatever that small win is, I think it's important for people to celebrate them. And inch by inch, you start to get stronger.
Absolutely. That's how you build resiliency.
Oh, girl, we getting into that. We getting into that. All of that. So what would you say was one of your biggest struggles, as we go into the topic of resiliency, that you faced with building in an e-commerce space, first of all, which was very new at the time when you started?
I would say it was myself. I was my biggest obstacle. And I think that's the case with a lot of people, is that they are their biggest obstacle. What I kept doing was, I kept comparing myself to other people who were doing business. Like, oh, well, they have this and they have a partner and they have, a BA or, a MBA and they have this and they have that. And I kept comparing myself to these people because it's like, I couldn't possibly have that type of success because I don't have what they have. But it turns out that was actually my strength, is that I didn't have what they have, and that's what made me special. And so I think, that's an obstacle a lot of people need to overcome. And, even still today, I still have that imposter syndrome. But yeah, I would say I am my biggest obstacle.
And you know what? I can contest to that. For me, working with people and even with myself, I would say that your mind takes over everything.
Absolutely.
And your mind gets in the way. It stops you from progressing. And for me, I look at myself and I say, okay, I look at my wins and I look at things that I knew I could have done better. Right. And then I sometimes stay there.
Yeah.
I sometimes stay in that space in between the win and, oh man, I could have done this a lot better.
Right.
But then it's like, now it's keep moving. Right? Just keep moving on, because if you stay in that space, that's where everything else seeps in.
Mm-hmm. That's where the harsh criticism, depression, all anxiety,
absolutely,
all that stuff creeps in.
Absolutely. So with Kinky Curly Yaki, what was it like back then with the e-commerce space for you?
Well, I didn't see many companies like mine in that space, or even women that looked like me in the space. Yep. So it was. I want to say I went into it naive, just because I didn't know better. Like, I didn't have any, prior experience or anything. So I just sort of I just dove in. So there was a lot of research. I had to do a lot of research. There weren't all these internet coaches there and at the time teaching people how to do things. So I literally just figured stuff out as I was going along. And I made a lot of mistakes. Which I think a lot of people are really fearful to do, but it's the only way you're going to learn. Like, the path to success is littered with failure.
Yes.
And the only way you're going to get there is through a lot of trial and error. So in the e-commerce space, you're going to make a lot of mistakes. You're going to order too much inventory, or you're not going to order enough inventory. Your pricing is going to be wrong, or there's going to be all kinds of things that go wrong. But what you need to do is be able to measure and to pivot. So I think that's a mistake that a lot of people are making as well, is that they set out with these, okay, I'm going to sell phone cases, and I'm going to sell, I'm going to sell 1 million phone cases and become a millionaire. But they didn't actually lay out the plan on how they're going to get to that 1 million cases. And not to say that I set out to build $1 million business, but what I had a reason for what I was doing. But if you're just doing things just for the sake of doing things, that's not really going to work for you. So that's especially true in the e-commerce space, where what I found really helped my company was that I had a story and I had a reason for building the company that I did. And so that resonated with a lot of people. But if you're just building, like I had, I was speaking with a client the other day, and she was like, oh, I started a skincare company, but I don't know why I started it. Well, that's why you have no sales, because you don't know why you started it. So, e-commerce is and especially, 7 years later, it's a different landscape than it was 7 years. But one of the things that you need to keep doing is you need to keep learning. You need to keep on your toes. You need to just keep learning.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think you hit it on the nose right there. A lot of people get into business for accolades.
Yes.
And it's about entrepreneurship, and it's about the fact that I have my own business, but they're not telling a story.
Right.
And stories is what sells.
Right.
So when I say this to my clients all the time, it's like, why are you doing what you're doing? Because if you don't know why you're doing what you're doing, then you don't have a story to tell your consumer.
And they don't know why they're buying.
Exactly. And then the other thing is that the power is actually in your story.
Absolutely.
And this is the part that we tend to miss. It's just like, you know what? I just don't want to work for anybody. I want to do my own business. But why do you want to do your own business?
Right.
Because sometimes you're just better off working for someone else.
Not everybody's cut out to be an entrepreneur.
Girl.
Entrepreneur life is not as sexy as it looks on social media.
I tell people all the time.
Yeah.
It looks so great. It looks like you have all this freedom to run around. But when the 30th or the 31st comes and you got to pay those bills,
those same bills come every month.
100%. And then it's like, okay, well, I had all the freedom all month, but I got to pay these bills now.
Yeah.
So, but the why to why you're in business is very, very essential. And I mean, with yourself, with your story, in terms of finding, you wanted to show up looking like you, that's powerful. And I feel that a lot of women share that same sentiment. And one of the things that I think the mold is still trying to be broken around is women talking about it. Because I don't feel that, you know, a lot of women just identify in this one particular lane, and they feel that because I'm a lawyer, I have to look a certain way.
Right.
Because I'm a doctor, I have to be in this lane, I have to look a certain way. Only the girls that are kind of like, you know, wear that type of hair or do that type of thing. So what does Kinky Curly Yaki do to kind of start those conversations, to getting women to feel, to open up the space, first of all, to create those conversations? Because I do feel that it's really vital to start engaging in those conversations with women.
So one of the things that I did is I built a community around my brand. So, and I also made it a point to show real women. So a lot of the people who are in a community are lawyers, they're doctors, they're moms, they're entrepreneurs, they're whatever.
Yeah.
And so then in showing real people, it sort of, it tells other women that it's okay to look like yourself.
Yes.
I think that when you're, you know, with other hair extension companies, I've seen them with, you know, they've living this glamorous life and blah, blah, blah. That's great. That's a great lifestyle to, you know, to aspire to, but that's not every day.
Yep. So
I always aim to show the everyday Black woman and to make it a point to show us smiling.
Yes.
Because we don't need any more angry black woman stereotypes. But what Kinky Curly Yaki does is that we encourage, like I always say, be your own beautiful. So it doesn't matter what that looks like, just make sure it's yours.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, awesome. That's beautiful. On that note, we're going to take a quick break and we'll be right back. Hello, and we are back on the Make Your Mark Talk Show, and today we are having a heated conversation in here with Miss Vivian Kay from Kinky Curly Yaki. So, Vivian, we've talked a lot about Kinky Curly Yaki, but now I want to talk about Vivian. She's like, ooh, you ready for this? So, Vivian, tell me about a time when you felt like, you know what, I don't want to do this anymore. You've been doing it, you hit a roadblock and you wanted to give up.
I was like every other day. I tell you, this entrepreneur life is not all that it's cracked up to be. It's one of the loneliest, it's just one of the most loneliest things that you can do, because it can alienate you from your family, your friends, especially when they don't have the same mindset, because you have to have a marathon mindset, you know, as an entrepreneur, because it's not a sprint, it's a marathon.
Yes.
So you have to be able to, you know, to keep going when the going gets tough.
Yeah.
So, you know, there's a number of times I've been wanting to give up. But then I always think back to my why. Why am I doing this? Why am I, like, you know, why am I putting myself through this torture, through this pain? And it honestly goes back to my son. X is my why. So my son's name is Xavier.
Okay.
So I always say X is my why. And really, someone said it earlier, but, you know, I want to leave a legacy for him. So I can't fail. And especially as a single mom, I want him to see that he can overcome whatever obstacles come in his way, no matter what the circumstances are. And you can't use those circumstances as an excuse. So, you know, I would say, you know, one of my biggest failures was when, or what I thought was a failure, but in turn was just really a huge lesson, would be, there's so many. there's so many. But if I had to pick one, you know, business-wise, I would say it was when I dropped 10 grand on a photo shoot and I absolutely hated everything. Because I realized that it wasn't what I wanted my brand to look like. And that 10 grand hurt my feelings. And then I had to turn around and spend 12 grand and US dollars and to redo the whole thing. So I would say that was probably one of my biggest failures, but I managed to overcome it, but it was a huge lesson, huge lesson.
Okay. So you talk a lot about the US.
Yes.
So do you tend to do more business in the US than in Canada?
Yes, I do. So I would say about 87% of my business is in the US. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
So I've heard this before many times that a lot of people that are Canadian entrepreneurs, they're shifting to focusing on the American market.
Yeah.
Why do you think that is?
I have a theory.
Okay.
And my theory is that with Canadians or even in the UK, we're immigrants. So we're coming from different countries and we know what absolute poor looks like. Whereas in the US, their version of poor is I hate to say it this way, but they couldn't get the latest pair of Jordans, right? They have government assistance, they're not absolute poor. So poor in the US is not the same as poor in Ghana or in Trinidad or in Jamaica. It's not the same poor. And so we tend to be a lot more careful with our money. And not to say that Americans aren't careful, but we tend to prioritize our light bills or, our rent and, that sort of thing. Whereas they tend to prioritize their looks.
Okay.
And how they see and how they show up in the world. And, there's nothing wrong with that. But I think we're not so concerned about our edges as the way they are concerned about their edges down here. As long as we got some, we're good, right? Whereas down there, it's like a whole, there's a whole thing with the baby hairs and all that. And I always tell my customers, I don't lay my baby hairs. They're there. Thank you. But they just have a different. I actually read this one thing in Maclean's magazine where the American dream is to be rich, whereas the Canadian dream is to be happy. So we just have a different set of priorities, I guess you could say.
Okay. Wow. I never thought about it like that.
Yeah.
Okay. So do you think the Canadian market is anywhere close to meeting the American market?
Absolutely not. We don't have that same sense of we don't have that. I don't think we'd have the same history. We don't have the same history as they do. Growing up in the Caribbean or in Africa, we showed up the way we showed up because we were amongst ourselves. Whereas with Americans, they had to, they were segregated and they had to integrate with the white Americans. So they sort of had to play the part more than we've had to. I don't know. I guess that would be my best explanation for that.
Okay.
Yeah.
So getting back to you, Vivian, you've been in business for a long time now. Mm-hmm. How do you know who to trust?
That's a good one. Especially as a woman, I think we tend to undervalue our intuition. Our intuition tells us whether or not we should trust someone. So I go off of vibes. Right. And it's a thing that, we underplay, but that's really what your gut, that's your gut. That's your intuition telling you about that person. So I always say, sometimes your energy precedes you.
Yeah.
So before you even open your mouth, you can see someone's energy. So I work off energy. I don't necessarily work off skills because you can teach skill, right? You can teach skill, but you can't teach, say, bratopsy. You can't teach, being nice. You can't teach being kind, but you can teach someone skills. So, learning to trusting people, and especially as Black people, we're just the mistrustful group of people. But I would say follow your gut. Your gut tells you what you need to do.
I totally agree with you.
Yeah.
I say this all the time. I'm working with a client right now that's trying to hire a huge roster. And I'll say to him, I said, listen, we need to find personalities and we need to find ethics. We don't need to find skill set. I can teach you. I can teach you to do pretty much anything I need you to do. But especially if you're in an environment of sales, and sales is actually one of those things where sometimes entrepreneurs get into a business and they miss the sales piece.
Right.
And the sales piece, the big part of sales is people buy people.
Right.
That's the piece that they miss.
Yes.
So you may have everything, you've checked everything off your list, but then your energy's off. And you get in front of people and they don't want to buy your product. You know, I remember once being at a pop-up shop and someone said to me, everyone buys from you. Everyone buys from you. It doesn't matter who passes by your booth. Everyone buys from you. Why aren't they buying from me? And I said, God help me, because I didn't want to really answer them. I had to ask, you know, for intervention. And people don't realize that people are attracted to energy.
Absolutely.
You know, if you're standing there with the attitude of feeling that you deserve an entitlement, right there, that alone, people will walk right past you.
Absolutely.
Nobody knows who you are.
Nope. They don't want to know.
Right. So if there's an aura about you that's shining, people will be attracted to you. And I feel that's one of the key pieces that people miss. And when you talk about energy, sometimes people look at you and you say to them, you know, I don't get a good feeling. Well, what does that mean? I don't get a good feeling. It's in my gut. I could feel like it doesn't feel good, you know? And it's hard to trust that, and it's hard for people that don't understand that to understand that.
Yeah.
So I totally hear you with that. Absolutely.
Well, what I liked, like one of the things I would like to say is people who feel like, well, how come? It's because they feel like there's not enough to go around.
Yes.
Right? So they live in this lack mindset. But I find that when you feel like there's abundance, because there's more than enough money, love, whatever it is, there's more than enough to come around. So if you set out with the best of intentions and you have a grateful heart, guess what? You're going to attract grateful. You're going to attract the good. You're going to attract because people are always talking about haters. I don't have haters because I don't attract them kind of people.
Yep.
Right?
And I agree with you in the sense that people will say, you know what, there's not enough to go around. And I will turn around and ask them, when was the last time you helped somebody? Because if there's not, when was the last time you gave back?
Right.
Right? Because I could tell you in this week how many people I've pointed in a different direction. I said, hey, I saw this opportunity over here. Go for that. I saw this over there. Go for that. This is here. Why don't you try this? Why don't you apply for this job? I can show you in my DMs. Like all these people I reach out to, I just saw this. I don't know if it's for you. And I'll say to people, who was the last person that you helped? Like without getting anything back and expecting anything in return. And that is it right there, is where sometimes when people do something, it's all a calculated approach where it's like, I'm going to do it if I get something back. But when was the last time you gave freely?
Because.
Right? On that note, we're going to take a quick break and we'll be right back.
It took a lot to get to this place, to feel comfortable to wear my own hair. It took a lot of reflection and coaching and support from the team here and of course my family. I know my husband really was looking forward to this experience of me exposing my hair, but I was afraid. I won't lie, I was afraid. I didn't know how it would come out. I had been so used to wearing units that I couldn't imagine myself exposed with such a short cut, my jawline and everything just kind of out there. But all in all, I have to say it was definitely a freeing experience and I'm so grateful for it. And I definitely would recommend it to anyone who has that self-doubt or that unsurety about exposing natural hair. I definitely would take that chance.
Hello, and we are back on the Make Your Mark talk show, and we're having some great conversation today with Vivian Kay from Kinky Curly Yaki. I just like the ring of that, eh? Do other people do too? Kinky Curly Yaki.
Kinky Curly Yaki. Kinky
right?
Curly Yaki. Yeah.
So, Vivian, just kind of delving into a little bit more of you and as an entrepreneur, how do you handle $1 million business along with being a single mom?
Well, they say you can't have it all. And balance, balance is really about priorities.
Yep.
So something's got to give. So if you're running $1 million business and you're raising children, it's like, so my love life fell by the wayside, right? So no, it's really about priorities. So it's like I built my business. The business is good. My son's 5 now. He's good. So now it's like, okay, so let me turn my focus to something else. So that's the thing. A lot of people think, oh, you can have it all. You can, but you just can't have it all at the same time. So it's just a matter of focusing on what is a priority at the time and really working at those so that when you do turn to that next thing, you can put your full attention on that.
Okay.
Yeah.
And your son, because I've seen a little bit of your social media, I would say that he is literally a replicate of you.
Yeah, he's
right.
Yeah.
He is a big personality. I recall probably a few weeks ago, I saw a video where he's like, I want to be the best Kinky Yaki person out there when I grow up. How does that make you feel?
It makes me feel good because of all the hard nights and all the tears and all the sacrifices I've had to make, that he sees what I'm doing. And if there's one thing that's, always kept me going, again, X is my Y. So he sees all the sacrifices that I'm making and he knows why I'm doing it. And he understands that. And he always thinks, like he always says it's our thing. So I'll say, get out of my car. He's like, Mommy, it's our car. It's our house. It's our business. Right? So just the fact that he sees his mommy working hard to give him the life that he enjoys is it's good. It's good. It humbles me actually, because it's like, oh, he is watching.
Yeah.
You don't know. Kids are always watching.
I think that's such an essential piece because sometimes people think that they're not, but they see and they feel everything.
Yep.
And on that note, how has social media, I want to get into the social media conversation. How has social media impacted you and your business?
I think what it's allowed me to do is to tell my story in my voice and as authentic as possible. So if there's one thing that I'm not polished, my feed's not, sexy, it's not, it's not, I don't know, it's me, it's all me. So it's allowed me to just bring my own brand of authenticity to the world, and people love it because they're like, wow, you're what I wish I could be. And it's like, girl, you can be that too. You just have to do it, right? So social media has been a blessing and a curse. It's what's helped built my business to what it is today. But then, there's been people who've tried to bring me down on social media. But then I don't let those people get to me. It's very easy to do. Comparison is a huge thing on social media. And I always say, if you're in your feed and there's someone that makes you feel a ways that is not good, unfollow that person. You don't need those types of feelings in your life. So there's no reason for you to be following them. If you feel like they're going to feel a ways if you unfollow them, then mute them so that you're not subjecting yourself to these feelings unnecessarily. So yeah.
Okay. And how do you know when to let go of something that's no longer serving you?
How do you know when to let go? That's a good question. Again, I'm a big follow my intuition thing. I just literally will wake up one day and be like, it's time to that's it. I'm done. Let it go. And then I'm also a big believer in God. So I like to say, let go and let God. And one of the things that I always, I think before I do, even, driving on the way here, I say, God, order my thoughts, my words, and my actions, and I let it go. So that everything that comes out of my mouth is what's supposed to come out of my mouth. Everything that I do is what I'm supposed to be doing. And so that's how you let go. You just let it go. It's hard. It's hard to do. Easier said than done.
It is.
Easier said than done, but literally you just have to let it go. Yeah.
And I think that for me, I'm a big believer too. When you feel it, just let it be. Mm-hmm. Don't fight the force. Because usually there's a reason. Like your intuition is real. Yeah. So what would you say some of your support systems are? Mentors that you've had potentially that have helped you along your journey?
Honestly, I haven't had a lot of mentors. I've relied a lot on myself, and I just really just followed my own gut. A lot of the decisions that I make, and some people, you sort of underestimate what your intuition is. Like even things like finding a parking spot. I just think I'm going to find a great parking spot. And guess what? Great parking spot comes up.
Yeah.
So same thing. It's like, you know, I need someone that's going to help me do this, you know, and I'm just going to put those good vibes out there and it comes to me. Right. But other than that, like the actual, you know, tactical things, like my family's been a great support system. I wouldn't have been able to create this business without their support. They helped me care for my son. Even in the early days, my mom and my dad would put the hang tags on the hair, and my mom would wash the hair. But yeah, they were a great support system. And I couldn't have grown the business and even but just like customers. They've been like one of my employees was a customer. She was like my second customer ever. Right. So, yeah, that's to say that you can't get to where you can't get to success without people. So you just need to let go of some things and delegate and let some people in order to help you achieve that success.
Okay, amazing. Have you had times where you've had to make decisions on collaborations and you had to say, you know what, this does not work for me. It's not in my spectrum. I don't see it in my long-term vision. And how did you deal with turning down a potential opportunity?
I had a huge one happen last year where I felt like they weren't really even though everything looked good on paper, it just wasn't, there was something about it that just wasn't quite right. And I had spent, you know, a lot more money than I should have. And I pulled the plug because I just felt like it just wasn't it. And that hurt my feelings. But in the long run, I think it was like it was a good decision that I had to make at the time. So there are times you're going to have to make some tough decisions where it looks like, you know, on paper, it looks like it's something you should do, but your gut will say, no, don't do it. And you need to follow it. And, you know, damned if you do, damned if you don't. So
yeah,
pick one.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So Vivian, how does Vivian show Vivian some self-love, some self-care? What does that look like for you in this big world of yours? Like, how do you find time for you?
You know, some people, I love to just sit down. I just like to just have a seat. I know it's a very underrated answer, but just sit down, have a seat, sit down quietly. But I also love to do things. I like to do karaoke.
Okay, I could totally see you doing karaoke.
I love karaoke. I'm one of those people who just get up there and I just belt it out like I can sing. I can't sing for nothing, but I will stand up there and act like I can, right?
Okay.
So that's, you know, for me, self-love, I'm not a spa person. I'm not like oh, let me go and relax. Oh my God. No. Either I'm a person of extremes. Either I just sit down quietly, or I'm up on stage, you know, singing, you know, Lauryn Hill like she broke my heart yesterday type thing.
So how have you, so in navigating your business through Toronto, let's just say right now, how have you found it with making connections with people that are able to work with you in a collaborative form, more so along the lines of women that you can count on? How has that creating a circle like that been for you?
It's been pretty, I've had actually a pretty positive experience. Some of my, I'd like to say some of the reason why I'm even out here today is because of women that I've surrounded myself with that were like, Vivian, you need to tell your story because your story resonates with me. I bet you it's going to resonate with, you know, dozens of other women. And they're the ones who've pushed me forward, right? So, you know, collaboration over competition for sure. You could see if you walk around thinking that every person or every woman you see is going to compete with you, is going to take what's yours, then guess what? That's probably going to happen. Mm-hmm. But if you see everything as more of a collaboration, or as, you know, she's giving me a leg up and I'm going to, you know, that whole thing where, you know, you get up and then you pull that sister up and then she pulls you up. Yeah. So as long as you see it that way, then that's the way it's going to be. But yeah, no, I love Toronto's been these are my people. They're the ones cheering me on in the DMs and in the comment section. They're my biggest cheerleaders. So shout out to Toronto.
So Vivian, if you were to give us one sentence you would tell a young person that's about to start a business or a young mom that wants to start their business, what would that piece of advice be?
I'm going to go back to the Rome thing. So they say Rome wasn't built in a day. So it was built brick by brick. Every hour, there was a brick laid. So that's how you have to think of your business. So if they let a setback of, there's not enough bricks here today, well, that's okay. They're going to make more bricks and you're just going to keep piling them on. Going back to the marathon thing, everything is not a marathon. I know on social media, all the highlights make it seem like, I built this company, in 2 weeks and I'm a millionaire overnight. That's not true. I've been an entrepreneur for 13 years. It took me 13 years to get to where I am today. So you always have to think of everything as a marathon. Stop trying to sprint. You're going to get tired. You're going to bruck up your leg. You're going to run out of breath. But if you pace yourself and you do it, I know I'm mixing analogies, but if you do it brick by brick by brick, next thing you know, you've got a wall. Yeah. And then next thing you know, you've got a whole building. And next thing you know, you've got a whole empire. So just focus on those small steps and enjoy them.
Awesome. Vivian, you've been a blessing to us today.
Oh,
thank you so very much for being here. How can our viewers find you?
You can follow me on Instagram. I'm a huge Instagrammer. So my business, Kinky Curly Yaki, KinkyCurlyYaki. Or you can follow me personally. I'm very entertaining.
She is actually very entertaining.
You can follow me at It's Vivian Kay. So ITSVIVIANKAYE.
Awesome. Thank you, Vivian, so much for being here today. You dropped a lot of gems. And thank you for being your authentic self. And honestly, thank you for being your authentic self on Instagram. When I first followed you, I was like, who is this lady? And then you put up some of your posts, I'm just dying. I'm just like, she's serious. But it's just the vulnerability that you're able to show makes people want to connect with you even more is what I've gotten. And now meeting you real in person, she's actually the same person on Instagram, because there are people that you meet in person and you see them on Instagram and the two don't talk.
Yeah.
So thank you for being you.
No, thank you for being you. No, wait. Accept the compliment. That's another thing.
Yeah.
Someone thanks you, say thank you, period. Thank you.
You're welcome. So make sure to follow us on Instagram at makeyourmark.ca, and you've logged on today, so you know how to find us, makeyourmark.ca. Till next time.